Well, I guess Auburn is probably adding 2 quarterbacks via the portal.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zac Blackerby, and thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. And joining me as he does every single Monday, it is the Lindsay Crosby. You can find his stuff over at thebarnauburn.com and other places. Lindsay, the transfer portal is now officially open. We don't have to worry about the semantics of if he's in the portal, if he's going to enter the portal. Now it's open. And so we're going to talk about Auburn's wide receiver situation. It changed over the course of the weekend, as well as a linebacker to watch moving forward. But the news hit Sunday. Hank Brown enters the portal. A week ago, we had this conversation, and Hank said he hadn't made up his mind yet. Well, now apparently he has. He is entering the portal. And I think with Hank entering and Peyton Thorne running out of eligibility, and you look at and Holden Geriner leaving, you're looking at a room now that has Walker White and Deuce Knight in it. I think you have to get 2 quarterbacks via the portal now.
Yes, you can't go into the season with just 2 scholarship quarterbacks. And obviously you could bring in one guy and you'd have 3. But I feel like we've seen too many situations where a team at best has 2 guys they feel comfortable in starting. Look at Saturday in the SEC championship game, right? Connor Beck goes down at the end of the first half. They run a backup in the whole second half, and then he leaves the game at the very end. And an injured Beck has to come back in for the game-winning handoff in overtime because they're not comfortable with the third-string guy. And I think even if you just get 1 portal guy, you're in that situation where 1 injury means you are starting a true freshman, or a redshirt freshman in Walker White, who got into almost no games, or a true freshman in Deuce Knight. So I think the bigger question for me is you're going to get 2. You need to get 2. Do you try to get 1 top of the line, slam dunk, this absolutely is the starter, and then find a veteran to be depth? Or do you find 2 guys that you think legitimately can start and let them battle with Walker and Deuce to see who wins the job going into next season? That's going to be the big thing for me to watch.
Yeah, I think the communication is going to be very clear on what the roles are. I think they're going to go and get a big name, or at least that's certainly the goal, where I think the story around it is going to be there's no way this guy doesn't start. I think that's the goal here. I mean, they are going big game hunting, if you will. They want to bring home, a massive name in the portal. And because of that, I don't think Auburn's starting quarterback next year is in the portal yet. I don't think he's any of the guys that have been, discussed, or really any of the conversation that we've had so far. I do think there are arguments why, a Caden Salter makes sense or why Jackson Arnold makes sense. But my gut reaction is those guys aren't it. I do want to throw out a name of a guy who is in the portal. I don't think he would be brought in specifically to start, but for that depth piece that you bring up, Lindsay. And that is Stanford quarterback transfer, Ashton Daniels. I think this could be a guy that they bring in to potentially be a backup on this year's football team. Just a guy to watch.
Yeah, there's a couple things about him when I started looking him up and we were talking about this that I like is 1, from Buford, Georgia. So, yes, he's a Stanford guy, but he's still from the South. Obviously, you have a different feeling about those guys. But 2 years as a starter at Stanford, he had 1 year where he was passing more than he was running, right? 2,200 yards in 2023, 11 touchdowns. And then his passing production took a step back in 24 from 2,200 yards to 1,700, but he ran for 669, and so he's shown the ability to be more run heavy, to be more pass heavy, and really just kind of being able to flex and move around what the offense that he's in. And I think that's something that you want from a backup, is a guy that can do whatever you need him to do, whether it's run the ball, hand the ball off, throw the ball. That flexibility is something that's nice for Auburn to have, assuming you use it the right way.
Yeah, so played in 33 career games while he was at Stanford. He's got 1 year left of eligibility, is my understanding. So that could be a kind of guy that that Auburn looks at. And obviously he needs to be interested in that type of role, but there seems to be a little bit of chatter, a little bit of smoke tying him, Ashton Daniels, to Auburn. So we'll see. We'll see exactly what that looks like. In regards to the chatter about some other guys, like I don't think I think it was On3 that made the graphic. I don't even know if it was a report or it might have been an opinion graphic. But early on, like there was chatter or at least speculation about like Miller, Moss, and Auburn. There were 3 schools. Auburn was one of them. Same with Jackson Arnold. Auburn was tied to him. I'm not as down on Caden Salter as other people are, but I don't think he could be your first, your first effort to save what's happening at Auburn if you're Hugh Freeze. But I don't think, my gut tells me it's not one of those guys, Lindsay. And my gut says that I think the guy that Hugh Freeze is looking at to help him turn this offense around from a scoring point of view, I don't think he's in the portal yet.
And if he's not in the portal yet, do you, and I know this is a lot of speculation here, do you think it's because he's still playing? He's part of the college football playoff, or he's in for his bowl game? Or is this just something where maybe he hasn't decided to go in the portal yet? Like, is this something when we talk about big game hunting, do we think that maybe one of these quarterbacks we're going to watch in the CFP is the guy at Auburn next year? Like how much hope should we have that the big game is going to be hunted?
I would guess that Auburn's next quarterback is not in the CFP. But you probably want the quarterback. All the traits that we talk about with what we all want Auburn's next quarterback to be is we want a guy who's been a proven starter. We don't want a lottery pick. We want a guy who's done it somewhere else. And if you're really checking all of these boxes, experience, production, proven winner, they're playing in a bowl game. And just with the nature of how the bowl calendar works now, it's pretty weird. I mean, you saw all of these teams that didn't make the college football playoff. I mean, especially like what's happened in Tuscaloosa, like they missed the playoff by 1 spot, and then they've got all these guys that enter the portal. And it's like, well, how do you play your bowl game with half of a roster? It's fascinating. It's fascinating. We saw it a little bit last year. I think it's going to be even worse this year.
Yeah.
And so
if was the big one.
Totally. Absolutely. And Auburn was kind of in there too. They had like 2 or 3 scholarship receivers in their bowl game last year. If I remember that correctly, it was very low. So, is it a situation where the quarterback even plays the bowl game? This is all so new. We don't really, there's not a consistent expectation or standard that's been set on this front. So I don't think we really know.
Yeah. And
worth noting.
Yeah, this is not something where like I'm hinting around that Auburn has a guy. It's just trying to figure out what caliber of play you're looking for. And I do agree with you that given some of the feedback that we've heard on the choice of Peyton Thorne and how Auburn may have tried to find somebody else and wasn't able to do it, whether it was that year or the next year, I do think you need to go out and do the big game hunting and get one of the best names. And you didn't even have a CFP, bracket until Sunday afternoon after the longest selection show in history, and the bowls are still being filled out. So it makes sense that guys are just now deciding whether or not they're going to go in the portal. Either way, it can be fun to watch the next couple of days when the portal's still open. Yeah,
no question about it. So we'll see what happens there. But yeah, I think Auburn has 2 quarterbacks. I think you try to get an upperclassman. I don't think it makes sense to get a younger guy to come in and wait, because you have that with Walker and Deuce. It doesn't make sense to get a first or a second year. Obviously, you can't get a first year player, but it doesn't make sense to get a second or a third year player. I think you need to get a guy with a bunch of experience that would be willing to come and be a backup. And that's going to be a tricky thing to balance for sure. Auburn is in the hunt for a linebacker, certainly a linebacker to watch. And he may have one of the best names on the roster if he were to come here. That's next, right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Omaha Steaks. Lindsay, can you imagine buying meat anywhere other than Omaha Steaks?
Well, no, because I want not just the highest quality of meat that is both a good price and tastes phenomenal. And the best place to get that, obviously, Omaha Steaks.
Nothing delivers comfort and joy quite like the unrivaled quality and taste of Omaha Steaks. Hey, right now you can save on unforgettable gifts with 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com, plus score an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE. That's it. Just promo code COLLEGE, COLLEGE. With 5 generations of experience, they consistently deliver the world's best steak experience. And the gifting experts at Omaha Steaks have made it easy to deliver their perfect gift with thoughtfully curated gift packages featuring the gourmet favorites. So from legendary steaks to mouth-watering desserts and more, save 50% off site-wide for a limited time over at omahasteaks.com. Use our promo code COLLEGE. That's 50% off at omahasteaks.com. Use promo code COLLEGE. Thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. Be sure to head over to the barn, auburn.com, is where you can check out all of Lindsay's Auburn baseball nuggets. He dropped some stuff in there last week that I thought was super, super insightful. So be sure to check that out if you want more of his Auburn coverage. A linebacker to watch in all of this, Phoenix Jackson, Fresno State, which Fresno is not a state, worth noting, but an experienced linebacker, played a ton a season ago, played in 11 games for Fresno, 448 total snaps on defense. Decent in coverage, but it sounds like he's got 3 visits scheduled. He visits Georgia Tech, then he visits Auburn. So he's at Georgia Tech December 11th and 12th, according to 247. He's at Auburn December 13th and 14th, and then he goes to Oklahoma State December 19th and 20th. But this is a guy that has kind of been linked to Auburn as soon as he announced that he would be entering the portal. Almost like a week ago. So certainly a name to watch, Phoenix Jackson.
Very weird that he doesn't have a visit up for Alabama, since he's coming from California, and they only will seem to want to recruit West Coast guys right now. So
they love
weird.
West Coast guys for
they
sure.
Haven't done that yet. They love it. Obviously worked out for them this year a lot. Yeah. They'll be sitting at home like we will. So you need linebackers. I've been talking about this all season, right? About how your room is so top heavy. Eugene Asante, Dorian Mayusi,
Austin Keys.
like so many guys.
Yeah.
Austin Keys, like so many of these guys are aging out of the program, out of eligibility, and you've got some studs back there. Robert Woodyard got more playing time than he got the year before. DeMarcus Riddick obviously had that big coming out party this season. You've got stuff there. But what you don't really have is experience. And so bringing in a dude, one with a great name like Phoenix Jackson, but
incredible.
I mean, he part-time player in 22 and then was close to a full-time guy in 23 and 24. This year, what I love looking at this is he did some of everything, right? He had 4 sacks. He had 2 interceptions, pass defenses. He was all around in every single regard. And I think that getting that well-rounded veteran, while the floor or the ceiling may not be the highest in the world, the floor is pretty gosh darn good. And that's what you need right now, is because you have ceiling with a guy like DeMarcus Riddick. You need the floor of the veteran stability and the experience from a guy like Phoenix Jackson. Plus, we got to get back on the all-name team. We have not been on the all-name team for college football in a while. And I think probably since Smoke Monday, maybe before that, King Dunlap, we got to get back on this all-name team.
Yeah, Phoenix Jackson is a linebacker name I think is incredible. It's absolutely incredible. But he plays super, super good. And to me, when you look at some of the stuff that Robert Woodyard, and I'm not going to put DeMarcus Riddick in this, but maybe what DJ Barber projects, it was those are guys that are your typical Mike linebacker that is going to excel against the run. And then, your typical college linebacker is a little spotty in passing situations. That is not Phoenix Jackson. Phoenix Jackson, I mean, according to Pro Football Focus, he's better when the opponent passes the football than when they run it, which I don't think you can understate or overstate is what I meant to say, how important it is to have a linebacker that's comfortable in coverage. I mean, we talked about this with several, like when Auburn had a really nice run of really good middle linebacker after really good middle linebacker with, Owen Papo and Deshaun Davis and Zacoby McClain. All those guys were solid, but like weren't great in pass coverage. Owen, I think, showed more traits than the other guys, but Phoenix Jackson would offer you that. And especially when you saw DJ Durkin's defense, sub out and they just had one linebacker on the field in those passing situations, I think Phoenix Jackson would be a candidate for that. So not only is this a guy that, maybe you don't play him on first down or second down or run heavy situations, but in passing situations, I mean, how many times were we frustrated with, it being 3rd and 11 and Auburn finds a way to give up 12 yards, right? And convert. I think getting guys like this, I think it helps in those passing situations.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't have the size of a guy like an Austin Keys, who was, 6'2", 247, but he's still listed at 6 foot 220. So, yeah, I mean, maybe he's not one of your go-to options in the goal line package, but so much of college football now is in nickel formations. Like you mentioned, sometimes you have one total linebacker on the field. He's a guy that, one, has the athleticism and the experience to play in those passing situations, but then also has just the knowledge to be a positively contributing defender in those pass coverage situations. And it feels like this is more sustainable than trying to go with like a extra safety as your linebacker in those situations. Get a guy who's experienced playing linebacker, who actually has shown to be decent at covering the pass versus a guy who's not great at it, or trying to fit a safety into there, and now you're vulnerable to the run and things like that.
Yep, that's right.
I like it.
That's right. Yeah, so I mean, it makes sense. We'll see what Auburn does as far as the pursuit of linebackers and how many. I think you could tell me 2. You could tell me 3 and I'd believe you, but you got to think it's going to be at least 2 linebackers that they add. It could be more. It could be more. We'll see how young they want to go. And obviously, DeMarcus Riddick's stellar season probably gives them a little more hope with that. But what do they think about DJ Barber? Like, is DJ Barber ready to be kind of almost promised one of these roles? Maybe. I mean, that just kind of depends on, what this coaching staff thinks about some of these younger guys that are still on the roster. So, for what it's worth,
he's
the guys that
are in all this.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think that's unfair to say. So, like, you're looking at a linebacker room right now with Robert Woodyard, DeMarcus Riddick, and DJ Barber. And I've said this before, like Laquan Robinson, we were told got reps at linebacker last summer. Does that continue going into next offseason? We'll just have to wait and see.
He is listed there on the roster as of right now. He is listed at linebacker on the roster. So you have to think either it's a, yes, we're cognizant of our depth kind of situation, or it's a, they legitimately think he can contribute. He's probably in a similar situation to Phoenix Jackson, being 6'1", 204, where he's more so in passing situations and not your goal line package. But even with, some linebackers in the class, I do think 2 would make sense. Yeah. I think you can get away with 2 if you feel good about Barber, and one of the 2 you bring in is a guy who you feel like can be your senior leader, who can do everything that you need, run, pass, and everything if it's a stud. And if it's not a guy like that, you probably have to look at getting 3, and you're packaging more than maybe we did last season.
Yeah, so they had 7 linebackers on scholarship last year. That's not counting Laquan Robinson. 8 if you count Laquan Robinson. And so you lose Mausi, Gote, Asante, and Keys. So that puts you at 4 if you count Laquan Robinson. And then you added
2 in Bryce Dees and JJ Falk.
And then Elijah Melendez. So you add 3. Right. And so that puts you at, if you had the same exact number, you would need 2, right? I just count that right. And it's also interesting, like, how do they actually view JJ Falk and Bryce Diaz? Because they're kind of like tweeners. So I'm interested to see exactly what that looks like, because JJ Falk could be an edge guy or a linebacker, and Diaz could be a linebacker or a nickel. So it just kind of depends on how they view those guys long term. And do those guys, even from the coach's point of view, impact the roster for this year? So we'll see. There's a lot of questions with that linebacker room. And worst case, you go young and you see these guys earlier, and I don't think that'd be the end of the world. I think we kind of proved that this year with the linebackers moving forward. Auburn's wide receiver situation changed over the weekend. Not unexpected. I think in the short term, it's good. Let's jump into that in just a moment, right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. Lindsay, can you imagine wagering anywhere other than our friends at FanDuel?
Listen, Zach, I was just in Las Vegas, and I had the option to go to all kinds of amazing sports books, Caesars, Wins, all this other stuff. You know where I did all my sports betting while I was in Las Vegas? The FanDuel Sportsbook, because there's a promo code, FanDuel.com/lockedon.
That's right. That's right. Hey, right now, new customers give out $5. You get $150 in bonus bets if you win. And the FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL or college football or the NBA, whatever it is, all in one place. So you can get started with $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet hits. All of that's over at FanDuel.com. Thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. The everydayers know this. We've talked about this before, but there were going to be questions about Auburn's wide receiver room when you talk about replacing some guys. I use the word reload, and it ticks some people off, but you lose Robert Lewis, you lose KLS. We knew those were going to happen. Now Camden Brown has announced he's going to enter the portal. Caleb Burton has announced he's going to enter the portal. So as we currently sit, Sam Jackson, Cam Coleman, Perry Thompson, Bryce Kane, and Malcolm Simmons are the returning guys in the wide receiver room. They added a few: Derek Smith, Eric Smith, Sam Turner. Are those guys going to be ready to start day one or play day one? I don't know. So still, like the picture here in the wide receiver room did change over the weekend.
But wait, Zach, don't I remember when you talked about you were probably going to see some guys who were going to move on out of this room? People on Twitter came after you and said, you are ridiculous. Why would anybody transfer out? We totally know more than the guy who has the #1 Auburn podcast in the Auburn media ecosystem.
Thank you. I was surprised, Lindsay, by the reaction of people saying we weren't going to lose any wide receivers. And I'm sure like the footing is changing. Well, we're not going to lose any of the freshman wide receivers. Like, okay, nobody said that you were. Nobody said that. Some people said Perry, but like, I don't think I buy that. I don't think he would be tweeting out some of the stuff that he was tweeting out after the A&M win, saying like next year's going to be great and all that stuff if he was thinking about leaving. So, odd response there. And like, I said they got to rebuild the room, but like you're losing 5 guys plus Rivaldo Fairweather. Like, I don't know. I just do feel like that's a rebuild, but whatever. Not going to get into semantics here. But when you look at it,
right,
I think with Caleb Burton and Cam Brown leaving, and now obviously Robert Lewis and KLS, we knew that they were gone. Like those are dudes that play outside and inside, the combination of them. So to me, I'm interested to see what type of receiver this coaching staff pursues and the eligibility that it's tied with. Because right now, your only senior will be Sam Jackson, who isn't even really a senior because he's played 1 year of receiver at the college level. I think they go and get 2 guys with 1 year left of eligibility, maybe 2 years left of eligibility. And probably 2 of those guys are outside receivers. One of those guys is a slot. And they may need to get more in the slot than last year because Rivaldo played a lot of slot snaps. How they handle this room, much like linebacker, is going to be interesting to me.
Yeah, you have the ability in both of these rooms, if you wanted to go young and have those guys, the young guys on your roster right now, be the primary playmakers and then just supplement with depth. They're not going to stand pat at either position. You're going to have to get somebody for numbers, but they have the ability. And I think one of them, you're going to see Auburn have to go young for the primary playmakers. Wide receiver feels like the position to me where it would be the most beneficial to go out and get one top line veteran with a year of eligibility and try to redo the KLS thing. Because I think you could argue KLS, and we've had this conversation before, just kind of casually said, he's up there in the pantheon of top like single season one and dones at Auburn, as far as it transfers in and things like that.
Sure.
But this room, with the fact that outside of Cam Coleman and Malcolm Simmons, your young talent didn't get a ton of run and have a ton of production in 2024, tells me that I really, that's where I want to go get one great playmaker. And the good thing is here, it could be an inside guy, it can be an outside guy, it can be a guy you use for both because you have the openings. But go get one top line guy and then supplement around him, because you don't want to throw everything on these freshmen, two of who in Perry Thompson and Bryce Kane barely played this year.
Yeah. I mean, I like that you say that the reps are there. I mean, just when you look at, KLS played 623 snaps. Malcolm Simmons played just 292. You got to think he'll get a lot of those snaps. Caleb Burton just played 21. I'm looking for
Cam
Rivaldo's. Brown. Yeah, and Cam Brown too. But I mean, I think Perry's going to take some of Cam Brown's. Why can't I find Rivaldo's stats? This is crazy. There he is. He played 530 total. And I've had this conversation before, but like how much of that was tight end and how much of that was him essentially playing receiver, but as a tight end? Or does Hugh is that how he's going to use his starting tight end regardless? We don't know.
Split the guy
really
out
know
wide,
exactly what
passes,
that looks like.
No matter who it is. Yeah.
Yeah, but like you can't do that with just anybody, or I think you're wasting a whole lot of like targets and just routes, and the whole market share doesn't really seem to make sense if you do that to me. So, I mean, yeah, between him and then Robert Lewis played 294 snaps. Like there's a lot to offer on both of them. Now, like, is Bryce Kane ready to take that next step? He could be, but I still think you have to get another one. Just because, unless you go out and get a really like dynamic tight end like you had with Rivaldo. But the good news about this, and I think this is what's different than the linebacker conversation we just had, is this is probably the last time you have to do this in the receiver room. I think in the linebacker room, you've got another year where you're going to have to do this. But with the receivers, I don't think you'll have to do this again. Assuming like one of the guys that you get as a junior, you'd have him, you'd have the freeze four, and then you'd have the three guys you just brought in. And it's like, okay, you feel kind of good about how the age is split up, throughout that room. And so like, I do think there's somewhat of a light at the end of the tunnel when you talk about like stabilizing the roster through just recruiting.
Yeah, when you restock a position like Auburn did in last class with the freeze four, it's not just an immediate impact that year. It pays off down the line in the portal. And this is a year where when you are operating on limited resources, and I'm not saying that to say Auburn doesn't have the money, I'm saying that nobody has unlimited money. When you're operating on limited resources, being able to go and over recruit a room in one specific recruiting class, like you arguably did in the freeze four, means that down the road, you can reallocate that money. Now, obviously, where that money is going to go is the big deal, right? It's not a win unless you use that money the right way. But you have the ability here, and you have the top end talent, I think, where you don't have to put as much financial resources into a transfer here. And then, like you said, next year as well, because of the makeup. Whereas linebacker, you had you brought in some freshmen, but you still were very upperclassmen heavy last year. And obviously, you're going to have to do that again, at least one more time before you could start getting those guys in there. You're a little behind in the linebacker room. But it feels like wide receiver's the thing. I'd rather go out and get one amazing dynamic dude and then some other depth. I just don't think you can count on hitting on both ends of talent acquisition again. Because KLS worked out, but then also Malcolm Simmons picked up the offense a lot faster than we thought he would, and he worked out.
Yeah.
And I don't think in a normal offseason you can count on both your transfer being so dynamic and one of your freshman receiver, or I guess a second freshman receiver getting a ton of play time.
It is wild that Malcolm and KLS, like, they didn't go through spring. Well, that's crazy. That is truly crazy to think about. So,
and it's not normal, so don't expect it going forward, people.
Yeah. Sure. Lindsay, how can people check out everything that you've got going on?
I'm on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. You can find all the Auburn baseball nugs at thebarnauburn.com. We're getting ready to start getting heavy into that in the spring. And if you're a Atlanta Braves fan, bravestoday.com is the Braves Today podcast.
Yep. Hey, be sure to like the video. Please subscribe, and we will see you next time. This has been Locked On Auburn.